to start some public. And so the next step for us is understanding how the public feels comfortable paying for things and what their values are. Hired a firm. I say this partnership has come together to help fund that and say, what are the values to our residents for these parks? How are they willing to pay most, slight increase in sales tax, property tax? There's a whole different slew of ways that cities have used to try to special district fees, those types of things, and what's palatable, and how do we market that, and how do we capture what those values are for people long term. So my plea to all of you is, if you use eBird, please keep submitting your checklists, and if you don't, please consider doing it. This is one example of how we're using this data. I've published 2 papers now using eBird data. There's a whole suite of other folks doing that. It's just a tremendous resource for us as biologists and scientists to look at this data, to look at trends. And yeah, it's not as good as, a standardized survey, but it's data that we can use. And some of these species, especially these songbirds, we just don't have any data at all. So trying to conserve them at all, we don't even know where they are. We don't know, So no, it's very, very valuable. So thank you.
Are the refuges in California open still?
Yep, you bet. And so with that in mind, that leads me, as I'm working with these parks, the other thing I'm trying to do is get kids out there and get the public out there. I'm working with a number of parks, and I want to summarize a little bit of what I've done. I've had a great run. Again, I started in '98 with the Yolo Basin Foundation, and then I was fortunate enough in 2002 I got a grant for teaching supplies. I've got 25 pairs of binoculars, a bunch of things I could bring into the classroom. And then with that, started developing curriculum around state standards. And then got 2 more grants, one in 2012 and one in 2015, to build habitat with schools. And it's been a great run. And then this last year, I've worked with 11 different schools, from preschool through high school. And actually next week, I've got a homeschool group, 15 kids from 6 years old to 11 years old. And I'm going to work with them in a more classroom setting first. And then next week, we're going out to William B. Pond Park and going to take a field trip looking for birds. And yeah, this has all been volunteer work for me. Maybe someday I'll get paid for it. But until then, I'll continue to take vacation time to work with kids. And I'll give you some examples of some of the things. So how this really all started for me, I'm going back to 2002. This picture here with the houses in that detention basin, that detention basin there, that's the pond that has all the cinnamon teal on it.
Where is that?
That's the city of West Sacramento. So here's the shipping channel off to the left of the picture, and then the Yolo bypass is on the other side of it. And in 2002, I bought one of these homes right up against the detention basin there. And most of these homes weren't there. The stuff on the other side of the detention basin was all grasslands. That road that runs alongside of it, that was not there yet. So none of that had been constructed. And I bought the house there, saw the detention basin. It was owned by the local reclamation district. I wanted to be a part of ensuring that, the habitat values stayed there when all this development came. So I went over to the reclamation district, introduced myself, what I did for a living. And the manager at that time, Ken, he says to me, well, Cliff, our real concern is once all these homes get built, schools go in and everything else, we're going to have kids in this pond. Boats, all that kind of stuff. And we can't afford the liability insurance. So we're going to put an 8-foot chain link fence around the whole thing, and we're going to shut it all down. And I was just thinking on my feet. And I said, you know what, Ken, that's not what we're going to do. I'll tell you what we're going to do. I live right there on the wetland. I work in an office from my home. The elementary school opens this fall. It's a 10-minute walk from the pond. I will go introduce myself to the staff. I will start an adopt a wetland program, and I will get everybody out there in the whole neighborhood and the community, and I will teach them the values, and I will patrol it. And he looks at me. He says, "You're not one of them environmentalists, are you?" And like I have on tonight, I had a Ducks Unlimited hat on, and he looks at my hat and goes, "Wait a minute, are you a duck hunter?" I said, "Yeah, no, I do some duck hunting." He shakes my hand and says, "Well, you know what? That would save us some money." And so in 2003, I went over to the school, Bridgeway Island Elementary School, introduced myself to the principal, told her what I wanted to do, said I'd like to join a staff meeting. 3 days later, went to their staff meeting, got a couple teachers interested, and lo and behold, started a program. And you can see this detention basin actually has some islands in there and peninsulas. And it's fascinating because as I talked to the city staff who designed that, I want to get the history of the pond and everything. And the guy gets kind of sheepish. He goes, "Well, we got a little rambunctious when we designed it. We wanted to put islands and peninsulas and varying depths so that we could predict where it was going to silt up first, and we could direct sediment and stuff, and it would last longer." Well, what they ended up doing was creating a bunch of wildlife habitat and great habitat for birds. And fortunate for me, as a waterfowl biologist in particular, that pond, which wasn't there in 1999, it was just a dry field, it was totally built. 10 years later, it has the highest concentration of cinnamon teal and blue-winged teal anywhere in North America. We get mid-December, we peak at about 350 blue-winged teal on 20 acres.
Oh, yeah, I see them now.
Yeah, nobody's ever heard of that in the Western United States. So it turns out to be a great place to take kids and to get going. So that started my career, if you will.
Is that a hot spot?
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's great. And so So, and if you're interested in seeing that pond sometime, I give 3 to 4 field trips a year in the wintertime through Sac Audubon. And I give some history of it, and I take people. It's a great place from a birding perspective to see female cinnamon teal and female blue-winged teal right next to each other and be able to learn those differences. Not many places we can do that. So I do a lot of that.
We'll put on the calendar next year.
Yeah. And so as I started figuring out what I wanted to do from a curriculum standpoint, I just started experimenting with things. And one of the things that stuck is one I do with kinder and first grade, which typically has a plant unit. They would typically grow a little seedling in a Dixie cup. Well, I'll come in, and you can see what I'm doing here. Bring in all kinds of different plant leaves, all kinds of different very small ones to big, huge ones, to cattails. We'll spend an afternoon in the classroom looking at all those things. And then the following week, we'll go on a field trip, even if it's on their campus, and just look for diversity of plants. Just get outside looking for that. And you can do it. Yeah, you can do it multiple times during the year, as the seasons change too, as you develop that plant unit. And then with second to third grade, there's actually a state standard that's city wildlife. And so we developed a unit around city wildlife. And yeah, you can see bring in bird wings, displays of eggs, get these kids touching and feeling things, and then take them out on a field trip. Fourth grade, it transitions into an ecology unit. And you can really do the same thing. And this one, more mammal-oriented, different biomes. But get the kids thinking about things like tracks and scat, and then get out on the field trip looking for that stuff. And just getting them outside and engaging them and teaching them that. And then one of my favorites is a climate change unit that I've taught a number of years for fifth grade. And in this scenario, the first part is, teaching the basics about climate change and what's going on, but then following up a week later with a presentation that oftentimes includes parents and talking about those biological impacts and what are those, not the cause, not any of the politics behind it, but what are those changes in the environment that we see and what's going on. And I show this picture of the bottom right of the brant. It's one of my favorites because it happened, I guess 2 years ago, gave this presentation, and one of the fathers who
What the hell?
uh-oh,
Oh, you're still on.
yeah, no, I didn't do anything.
If he's not up there,
Huh?
he lost it up there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I must still be going. Yeah, no, I'm still going. You got to pull it back on yours.
He wants you to save it to a folder thing.
There we go.
Thank you.
Yeah, so this Black Brant, and one of the fathers who I had met before stands up, question session, says, Mr. Feldheim, when are you going to tell these kids that this is nothing but a bunch of lies and liberal hogwash? And I pulled this slide back up again, and you look at something like Black Brant. That's a species we've got 40 years worth of data. They migrate along the Pacific coast. We know where they go. We can predict almost within a week of when they're going to arrive along the north coast all the way to Mexico. And they stage in Eisenbeck Lagoon. And in general, we get about 150,000 at a time staging in Eisenbeck Lagoon. Currently, 50,000 of them spend the entire winter there and don't even migrate. Something's going on, you know? I don't care what the cause is. I don't care if it's, these birds, wildlife is telling us something. And we need, again, we have that choice. What are we going to do with it? How are we going to respond to those changes? But there's lots of examples in the fish world and the bird world of these changes taking place. And, just getting people aware of those things. And, from that, fortunate enough, I'll give a couple examples of two schoolyard projects I've done. Really looking at doing projects on a school or adjacent land nearby, which really takes an investment of staff that want to be involved long-term, oftentimes volunteers, sometimes even groups like FFA. One of the schools I worked with, they very much wanted to keep that agricultural tradition alive in their community and wanted to partner on those types of things. So it takes more of a commitment than, simply volunteering on moment's notice and going into a school. And working with landowners and organizations, and I've been fortunate. This one we did at the Bridgeway Island School there in West Sacramento. Created the schoolyard habitat. This was an area, their campus was just grass and a couple non-native shrubs, and planted a whole suite of different plants. Brought in rocks, logs. Created diversity of habitat. Some water features, seasonal water features that they could fill up. Put birdhouses out there, and then you can put your curriculum around that. And then with that, you can see put a walking path in there. The CCCs are a great resource. They have a volunteer day that they do, and so I called up the CCCs. Their crew was totally excited to get out to the school. They dug everything up. They laid the decomposed granite path. Their crew had been working in the Sierras, building trails, so they had the logs for us. Just brought all that stuff together. And you can see, what it looks like now. So you take this, grassy area that was nothing, and now the kids are out there. They can monitor the birds. They can be a part. There's some pollinator plants out there for the butterflies and the insects, and just bringing that all together. And similarly, then in Clarksburg, in the Delta, the ag community is very strong there. And the idea was proposed, how about, we're growing food for humans in agriculture. We're planting habitat for wildlife. What if we put those two things next to each other? And so you can see what the site kind of looked like in this top middle picture, just bare land. And we went in there, you can see some planter bed boxes on the left and right. So one is planted as pollinators, one is planted as vegetables, essentially, that the kids can plant and harvest, and then they can, maintain the pollinator garden for things. And then we planted a suite of native plants around there for birds. And then actually, in this case, dedicated the garden to one of the longtime local residents. And it was great. One of the farmers came in, donated the decomposed granite, and wanted to be a part of preserving all that. So different, again, the commitment of the community is there. But you can see it's right across the street's a bunch of houses. It's a part of their community now, and they take pride in it.
Cool.
Yeah, so that kind of leads us to this idea, if you will. Um, I've argued, and I will continue, that we're in a new era of conservation, where in general we know what needs to be done. Even with something like climate change, the science is for any reasonable person is relatively settled. We know what's going on. We know how to change things. We know how to, you know, most of our habitats and species, we know how to recover them. We know how to build these habitats. We know what needs to be done in our environment, but we can't get enough people concerned enough to do anything. And we can't get governments to do anything. We can't get politicians to do anything. In some cases, we can't get countries to do anything. So increasingly then, with our urban society, how do we get people concerned about these things? How do we get people to pay for, we need to pay for conservation, and not just the flashy restoration, but the management of those sites, the getting out the BlackBerry. You guys mentioned, that people don't like paying, even funding organizations for habitat don't like paying for that kind of stuff. They want the flashy things where you're building big chunks of habitat. How do we get the funds to do that, and the research to maintain that, and figure out more, and how do we do it in a large scale? And I'll say, for me as a biologist, as a restoration practitioner, if you will, where and how do we build habitat in places that engage people, that engage wildlife? And we've done a great job of understanding the science behind how to build habitat. A lot of our species did a horrible job understanding people. And we just, as scientists, I'll take credit for it. We just haven't invested the time in engaging people, engaging communities, engaging folks all the way along the line. And so what we get is like that slide with climate change, these extreme titles, these showy things that make money, that grab headlines, but we don't get the facts behind things. We don't get, that central view of what's really going on. And it's a challenge for all of us, and every day, how can we be a part of making this better, and changing that narrative? And there is hope for the future. I think, again, the flip side of that is, even climate change, human pressures, we have a choice. We can build these habitats, we can conserve these species, we can make the changes that are necessary. We have a choice, really, much like getting back to the barred owl and spotted owl. We have a choice of what we want, and we have that across the board. So it's daunting, it's scary, but it's also hopeful, because we can change that energy, and we can make it happen. And I'll leave you with one more story. This one I call Brooklyn's story. This is at detention basin in West Sacramento, and one of the first school groups I worked with was the second grade there. I worked with them in the classroom the first week, and then took three classrooms individually in the second grade out to the wetland on the field trip. And one of the field trips, one of the girls, Brooklyn, was just so totally engaged. I had binoculars for everybody. And there's white pelicans out there, and she was just fascinated with the pelicans. Blackneck stilts were giving us a show, avocets. There was some lots of different ducks, and she just kept asking me question after question, engaging me the whole time, and just had a bunch of fun. And I didn't think much of it. About 4 or 5 days later, West Sacramento was small enough at that time. We only had one grocery store and a Target on that side of town. And I was shopping in Target, and I hear, Mr. Clapp, Mr. Clapp, and ran into Brooklyn and her mom. And her mom starts telling me how much fun Brooklyn had and everything. We talked for a little while. I saw him a few more times over the next 6 months. Same thing. And I thought, what, if I see Brooklyn again, I'm going to give her a pair of binoculars and a bird book. And so each time I went to Target or Nugget grocery store, I had that in my cart. And sure enough, I ran into her mother, gave them the binoculars. Fast forward, I guess it would be about 10 years, I ran into her mother at Target. And she says, Cliff, you're not going to believe this, but Brooklyn just got into Cornell. All she wants to do is study birds and wildlife, conserve habitat, And she says, you know what, Cliff, we don't camp. We don't go to national parks. It's dirty. There's bugs. We don't go outside. This happened because of second grade. And that's what's fueled me. That's why I take vacation time to work with kids. That's my energy. I was fortunate enough to have that follow through with that family. But how many other times does that happen? How many times can we all do that? And these occurrences we have, whether it's field trips we lead, whether it's those connections we can make and those differences we can make. So there's hope.
Is that the little girl in the left lower corner with the white?
Yes. Yeah, you can see how excited Brooklyn is. And you can see this is at a time this is my backyard. Started the kids in my backyard. Yeah, that's all I've got. So thank you. No, thank you. I've been fortunate to have a great run. And
Banded shoveler, huh?
man, you gotta love banded shovelers. Lots of energy. Yeah, one of my blessings in life, I realized when my babies came home, I pretty much took care of my babies exclusively at night. And so I had a 1-year-old and a newborn. And there was times I was up every 45 minutes with one in each arm. And, it was long days and long weeks. And, I functioned just fine. I didn't need sleep. And so yeah, I can raise kids. I can sit on 4 boards of directors and I can work full time and we can get stuff done because I'll stay up late and I'll get up early.
I wonder if can you hear us, Dan?
Yes.
He said yes.
Yes.
Oh,
We can barely hear him.
Well, you got questions? Or is this time for warm thank you?
Is there any-
Actually, I have a question. If you can hear me there. So Cliff, with the work you do with kids,
Hold on, we can't hear you very well. Let's see if we can figure out.
Go ahead and mute, because it's gonna be a big loop. So, okay, where's that remote go?
All right, I'm muted.
the remote?
Where's the remote? See if that'll work. Okay, Dan, go ahead.
thank you. So Cliff, with the work you do with kids, I'm just kind of curious. Are you familiar at all with the work of Doug Tallamy?
We can't hear you, Dan.
Okay, now.
No, but actually, if you unplug that phone and maybe
You can type it in the chat. Type your question in the chat.
now, Dan. Oh,
I don't hear anything.
oh, it can hear you.
Oh, good. So should I
You can hear me. And I can hear
Cliff,
Yeah.
are you familiar with Doug Tallamy?
No, I'm not, Dan.
Check.
Turn off your
It,
mic.
yeah, I can't talk. I already know a reverb. But it's he's got this. He's an entomologist from University of Delaware, and his he's got a few things going, but basically he's got this idea of a homegrown national park. And it just occurs to me that it could be something useful in your work with kids. Basically, kind of a key idea. He's an entomologist. It's caterpillars. Songbirds need caterpillars to raise their babies. So if you want to have help songbirds and have them in your yard and have them nest in your yard, you've got to grow plants, typically natives, typically certain natives, that support caterpillars. I can't hear you.
Okay, how about now? You got me now, Dan?
Yes. Yes, you're good.
No, that's great. I'm working with the city of Sacramento and some other partners in the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to develop U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service's urban bird treaty program.
Mhm.
And we will be identifying those types of things and then those actions, and then we will be eligible for grants for that kind of work. So that fits in perfectly.
Yeah, it sounded like, for kids to do at home kind of a thing.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, thanks for the presentation.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, thank you.
Ditto. It was wonderful. Kudos to your work on the Poudre River and Poudre Creek and all the years with children. That's wonderful.
No, thank you. I say it's been a good run. Been able to take advantage of a lot of things. More to do. Thank you all for hanging in through all this
Crazy stuff.
technological mishaps.
Hey,
And I'll say, if any of you want to follow up with me about anything, you can find my contact information all over the web. Sacramento
All right.
has got a write up on me with all my contact, ECOS, as well as FER. If you just put my name in, I think you'll get my email and my phone number if you ever want to follow up and talk about anything or share anything with me. I appreciate
Thank you so much.
it. Well, thank you.
all right.
Thanks, Larry, and
Yeah,
everybody who made the meeting possible. Thank you.
thanks for coming.
And thanks for hanging in.
Yeah.
Don't forget, April 21st, Live Birds, Turtle Bay.
How about May 11th? Is there going to be a field trip about the hawks up to
Yep.
the Butte Valley grasslands?
Yes, we're gonna be doing that on the 11th. I'm gonna talk to Larry about getting an announcement earlier than the newsletter would come out, so.
I'm looking forward to that. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, thanks, everybody.
Yay, thank you.
Well, that was fascinating, but I think